Those of you who have been following my channel for at least the last few months know that I often do videos about free speech and internet censorship and what's happening online right now. And I have done some videos about Section 230. And I'll be the first one to admit that I am not an internet expert. And frankly, before I even got into this world of YouTube censorship and free speech analysis, I didn't even know what Section 230 was. Now, I will link a longer video that I did about Section 230, breaking it down in much more detail in the description. And I will also have that at the end of this video, so you can click on that as well. It was about how whoever replaced Justice Ginsburg could potentially sit on the Supreme Court that would potentially rule on this particular case, because it's likely that as Section 230 faces increased pressure actually from both sides of the aisle, that at some point there will be litigation that may make its way all the way to the Supreme Court. So if you're interested in that, check out the description or wait to the end of the video and you can just click on that. But I wanted to talk about this very quickly because President Trump has tweeted that Section 230 should be revoked. On November 26th, 8:11 p.m., he says, "For purposes of national security, Section 230 must be immediately terminated." Actually, Joe Biden also wants to revoke Section 230, or at least that's what he told the New York Times in this long interview with them last year, where he says, "I've been in the view that not only should we be worrying about the concentration of power, we should be worried about the lack of privacy and them being exempt," which you're not. The Times can't write something, to be false and be exempt from being sued, but he can, referencing Mark Zuckerberg. The idea that it's a tech company is that Section 230 should be revoked, immediately should be revoked, number one, for Zuckerberg and other platforms. So here is the simple version of what Section 230 is and what it does. Again, you can watch greater detail about this in other videos on my channel, but let me read it to you because it's very short. "No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider." Essentially, Section 230 is this part of the Communications Decency Act of 1996 that protects these platforms, these search engines like Google, from being held liable for the vast majority of what is posted on their sites. And so when you hear people on either side of the aisle, for instance, argue about this, you'll often hear that they'll feel like the internet companies, these social media companies, or Google as a search engine or the other ones, have too much power because of Section 230, because they're not held to the same kind of liability standards as a publisher, okay? Because they're not going to be, in the vast majority of cases, there are certain loopholes to this, but the vast majority of cases, they are not going to be able to be sued for what you post on them. And so that's allowed the internet to kind of explode the way that it has, because these internet companies aren't afraid that they have to go in and manage all the content in order to keep themselves out of court. Now, what you're going to hear from the left sometimes is that there should be more regulation because too much misinformation has gotten out there. Now, I will say there are plenty of people on the left that would be sort of the establishment skeptic left that don't think that there should be a lockdown on misinformation because they see how they can come back and bite them. As much as you've been hearing kind of that argument from conservatives who feel like their viewpoints don't align with like the community guidelines, for instance, or the fact checkers on a lot of these social media sites. And so they'll say that they're being unfairly targeted. The problem here, though, is what's the solution? Because as we're seeing more and more and more, these social media platforms and the search engines, they do have a lot of power, and they have been able to go through and frame our discourse, whether that is by flagging content that they have determined themselves to be misinformation, or booting people from platforms that they've decided are dangerous or harmful to discourse. And so again, like I said, you hear calls from both the left and the right that this needs to be reformed, that Section 230 needs to potentially be thrown out the window, as you see President Trump say. But I will tell you, reading through a lot of the material about what to do with Section 230, just getting rid of it altogether seems like it could be a very dangerous idea. So I went in search of information about ideas that we could look at as alternatives to just getting rid of Section 230, because the problem with just getting rid of Section 230, many people will say, is that it would potentially lead to an even tighter lockdown on information, because now these internet companies are going to be even more incentivized to censor, because now they can actually face liability for what's on their sites. And that's not going to favor small producers, for instance, like myself. And it's not going to favor people on sort of the outside of the establishment power structure. So there's, I think, a lot of risk in just getting rid of Section 230. So are there other ideas for what you can do? I find this article in The Hill, and this guy brings up some ideas which I frankly think present their own dangers. So I wanted to read it to you, not to argue against him, but to just bring up the other ideas that are out there that I think could potentially not necessarily make things better. As they say, the road to hell is paved in good intentions. And as somebody who has faced the consequences of censorship online, I have videos that YouTube has flagged as harmful content, which are ridiculously not harmful content. It was just talking about, for instance, one of them was an interview with somebody that was participating in protests over the COVID lockdowns. Like, it's kind of crazy how some of these videos are considered harmful by YouTube. So I'll be the first one to say, like, I have been the recipient of these arbitrary policies. At the same time, I'm a thoughtful enough person that I don't want to make things worse in my efforts to try to make things better. And so I'm really trying to think through this in a complex way in order to help you all understand what I'm learning. Because again, like I said, I'm no expert on this, but I want you all to see these arguments as they're happening, because, you know, your voted in politicians are going to be talking about this a lot in the months and years to come. And it's important that you know some of the ways that they're working policy that may not benefit us, those of us who really enjoy a free flow of information, that may end up making things more locked down in the long run than more free. And I think most of the people who subscribe to my channel would like a freer flow of information, not less of that. So this article is, again, in The Hill, Section 230 fight Congress should be having. So he's saying, like, this is what they should be talking about. And the guy's name is Paul M. Barrett. He's an opinion contributor. And if we look down here, I'll just tell you what he does. He's deputy director of the NYU Stern Center for Business and Human Rights. So he's got a couple ideas towards the bottom. I'll link this in the description so you can read it. And he says here, it's unrealistic in the current frenzied political environment to expect substantive progress on this front, but in a hoped-for future period of calm deliberation, there are ways that Section 230 could be updated and improved. So he has one idea here. It says that a group of scholars brought together by the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business recommended in a 2019 report that lawmakers restructure Section 230 so that internet companies would enjoy the provision's immunity benefits only if they agree to new obligations. One such obligation could be ensuring that algorithms don't promote sensationalistic, unreliable material to boost user engagement. Another could be disclosing more granular data on content moderation methods and advertising practices. Now, let me go back to that original one, okay? Ensuring that algorithms don't promote sensationalistic, unreliable material to boost user engagement. Who defines what is sensational or unreliable? See, this is the problem with asking for a gatekeeper. First, you have to choose who they're going to be, and then they get to define the terms. So even though people will clamor about misinformation online, the dangers of misinformation online, what's the alternative? That's the hard part. I mean, I'm stuck there too. What's the alternative? Because all I see right now is the alternative would be exactly what this guy says. Somebody in Silicon Valley is going to rework the algorithm so that it doesn't promote what it's going to define by these human coders as sensationalistic, unreliable material. Now, somebody could say that unreliable material is your stories about the COVID lockdowns and how they've affected your business. That could be unreliable because it's your personal story. And they could say that you're promoting disinformation to hurt the public health response against COVID-19. So do you want to give up your ability to speak on the internet about your experience of the COVID lockdowns if somebody comes in and determines that those are unreliable sources because you're just some person? You're not MSNBC or Fox News or NBC or CBS. You're not one of the mainline organizations. I don't think so. Here's another one. Congress could create a new digital regulatory agency that would focus on making platforms more transparent and accountable. This would have to be done without empowering the agency to supervise specific content decisions, because that would violate the First Amendment speech clause. Exactly. So that's a great point. When you pull the government in now and they're going to start regulating it, where does that intersect with the First Amendment? Now, then again, maybe as citizens, we might have greater recourse against the government because you can actually fight First Amendment cases in court, whereas it's very difficult to fight court cases against these social media companies because they're private companies, right? But now you have once again set yourself back up for a gatekeeper who has to define these terms. Harmful content, deleterious content, what is prevalence, how bad is so bad, when should you face a fine? Who's going to decide all this? I guess if it's not the social media companies, which we have now deciding these terms for us, it's going to be the government. Does that make you feel better? I don't know. Leave me a comment and let me know, because to me it seems like, well, that could first off change with the tides of whoever is in power. And maybe it's not your person in power, but you handed over the keys to the ignition of your vehicle for discourse to drive off into the sunset. So this is a tricky situation. It is complicated. It's sometimes oversimplified. And it's easy to be emotionally reactive to what's happening online, because I'll be the first one to admit it's annoying. It's annoying to regularly be flagged by YouTube. It's annoying to feel like, you're constantly having to argue with YouTube that your content's not harmful. It just challenges establishment ideas. It is annoying. But once again, I am the first to realize that my efforts, if I were to just kind of go unhinged on this and argue that we should just beat the crap out of these internet companies, takes 230 away, and impose government regulation immediately on them, I'm the first to say, I don't know if that's going to be getting us where we want to go. Because like I said, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So this is not meant to be an exhaustive video on this topic, as none of mine are really. I do like talking about this, and I'm interested in what you're thinking. There's got to be somebody out there who watches the channel who knows better than I do, who can leave me a comment about people that I could interview even for these videos, so that we can maybe have a better conversation about what to do. But so far, I haven't seen a lot of really great ideas, to be quite honest with you, because like I said, it's like, do you rob Peter to pay Paul? Are you just trading, one kind of trash for another that just looks a little bit better? Well, maybe you have more power and influence because you can at least vote in your government leaders, whereas Silicon Valley, we really don't vote for them. But who on this channel watching really believes that the government has your best interest at heart always when it comes to free speech and discourse, okay? I think we can all probably agree that that is not a unanimous trait of government officials. So handing them the keys, I think, also can lead us down a pretty dark path. That said, I'm going to leave it there. I'd like to hear what you guys think about this. Leave me a comment. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. There are links in the description for how you can support my work. Thank you to everybody who already does so, and I will see you next time.